Imagine realizing the person you trusted more than anyone else was quietly destroying you while you slept. This is the story of Gisèle Pelicot. And once you hear it, you won't forget it. For decades, Gisèle lived what looked like a normal life. A long marriage, children, routine, trust. Nothing about her story screamed danger. That's what makes it terrifying. Because evil doesn't always arrive screaming. Sometimes it wears the face of a husband. Sometimes it shares your bed. Sometimes it waits patiently for years. The truth didn't come from a confession. It didn't come from suspicion. It came from the police. A summons. A quiet request to come in. Her husband, Dominique Pelicot, had been caught secretly filming women in public places. Unsettling, yes, but still explainable. Still survivable. Gisèle went with him, believing she was standing beside her partner. She had no idea that moment was the doorway into what she would later call her descent into hell. What investigators uncovered next didn't just shock her. It obliterated her reality. 4 years, not days, not weeks, years. Her husband had been drugging her. Not to steal. Not to hurt her physically in obvious ways. But to erase her. To make her unconscious. And then, while she was helpless, he invited men into their home. Dozens of them. Men who violated her while she lay unconscious. Unable to speak, unable to resist, unable to remember. Her body was used. Her autonomy erased. Her life invaded, repeatedly, without her knowing. When Gisèle finally learned the truth, she didn't describe it as sadness. She described it as something exploding inside her. A wave so violent it felt like a tsunami tearing through everything she was. And then came the moment she says nearly broke her completely. Calling her children. Imagine making that call. Imagine telling your sons and daughters that their father, the man who raised them, was responsible for something so monstrous it barely feels human. She has said that conversation remains one of the hardest things she has ever done. As the case moved to trial, the country watched. Not because the story was sensational, but because it was horrifyingly real. For months, Gisèle sat in courtrooms listening to details no person should ever have to hear about their own life. And she faced a choice. She could remain anonymous, protected, hidden, or she could step forward. She chose to be seen. She chose to put her name and face to the truth. And she has said she never once regretted that decision. Because anonymity can protect victims, but visibility can protect future ones. Her husband was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Justice, on paper. But Gisèle has said justice doesn't erase questions. There are still things she wants to ask him. Things only he knows. Things she may never receive answers to. And maybe that's the cruelest part. Not just the crime, but the permanent absence of closure. Instead of retreating into silence, Gisèle did something extraordinary. She spoke. She wrote. She told her story in her memoir, A Hymn to Life, not to relive pain, but to reclaim herself. This wasn't about revenge. It was about warning the world. About exposing how abuse can hide inside normal lives. How predators don't always look dangerous. And how trust can be weaponized. Her story forces us to confront something deeply uncomfortable. That the greatest threats aren't always strangers in dark alleys. Sometimes they are the people we trust most. Sometimes they sit at our dinner table. Sometimes they build entire lives on lies. Gisèle Pelicot survived unimaginable betrayal, not just of her body, but of her reality. Her courage isn't loud. It isn't theatrical. It's quiet, relentless, and unbreakable. And by telling her story, she made sure this truth could never be buried again. So if this story shook you, if it disturbed you, if it made you question what safety really means, talk about it. Share it. Because silence is exactly what monsters depend on. And voices like hers are how they lose.